Good afternoon, everyone. I'm trying to get a little action and excitement in the room. Thank you so much. I think we're all thrilled to be here to talk about a subject that is near and dear to all of our hearts. But first, I'd like to introduce the panel and ask them to say a little bit about themselves. So I'll start with Marc Amblard. And Marc, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Selika. Hello, everyone. My name is Marc. I'm based in San Francisco. I've been in Silicon Valley for about 10 years now. I'm an advisor to car manufacturers, suppliers, but as well to startups across the mobility space and future mobility technologies. So happy to be here.
Jan?
Jan Becker. I'm the founder, CEO of Apex.AI. Over the past now almost 30 years, I've developed about a dozen autonomous vehicles. Started Apex.AI 8 years ago. Now we focus on the safety, reliability, and security layer.
Perfect. Yuri?
Yes, I'm Yuri Misnik. I'm a technologist. I spent all my life in technology, different areas, but right now I'm a Chief Technology Officer for inDrive. We are the global mobility and urban services platform.
Hi.
Hi.
So my name is Yvonne Winter. I'm CEO of Flynow Arabia and the president of the Sky Alliance for Automated Air Mobility called Salam. In Salam, this is an international non-profit organization where we brought together the entire ecosystem to develop a turnkey solution for the implementation of 3D mobility. At Flynow, we developed a modular e-copter system, we call it. It's an electric helicopter flying automatically, transporting goods and passengers, as well as a firefighting solution and a medevac solution. Thank you.
I love it. I am probably the most robust person in the room when it comes to the future of autonomy. And our panel is entitled Autonomy and AI from Streets to the Skies. We often talk about autonomy ground separate from the sky, but today we're going to share in that conversation together, thinking about them collectively. So, for the entire panel, I'm going to ask each of you to give me what your perception is of this single biggest challenge when it comes to earning public trust for autonomy. And that is based, obviously, on your area of expertise, whether it be sky or the ground, and then talk about sort of the differences based on where you are. So I'm going to start with Yvonne down at the end.
So actually, first of all, I think the biggest challenge for implementing this new means of transport is the stakeholder management, because you have to have the government, the regulatory bodies, all the different companies aligned on one vision and one scope of implementation, and then win, of course, the trust of the people. And in order to win the trust, I think we have to go in a very careful step-by-step approach. So starting with a sandbox, proving the technology that it is viable, and then as a next step to have the implementation of cargo first and firefighting, and really prove to the core that it is safe, that it is working, and so forth, and then step-by-step implement the first passenger transportation. So it's all about gaining trust, and it's all about bringing value. And bringing value is having something that is affordable and available for the broad public, because when it can be only used by a few 10,000, all the other people will fight it.
Yuri, what's your biggest challenge?
I can start probably with the point what is not a challenge. I actually don't think, and even at least looking from the ground-based transportation, I don't think technology is a challenge. I think technology is evolving at such a fascinating speed that whatever we've seen in limitations of the models and AI ecosystem around the models is now sort of whatever is not solved now will be solved in the near future, and we're seeing the maturity of autonomous systems are improving pretty much every day. I actually think I agree with what we're talking about. It's about trust, and from my perspective, the biggest challenge is transparency. And from my perspective, that one thing which we need to go to both in ground-based mobility as well as potentially in the in the skies mobility, in the autonomous planes and helicopters and drones is the public trust builds together with having access to the information about what's happening in the environment, what we're learning, how do the different providers actually learn from each other, and sort of the trust based on data and based on the information about incidents, about near misses, about the evolution of the models, etc. And I think that will be something which we need to establish, because right now I think it's a bit of a competition, and we probably need to switch the ecosystem towards something like co-opetition driving forward.
Jan?
So I agree with you that the technology is there. I've built many autonomous vehicles over the years. It's actually not a problem to build a vehicle that drives around the block a couple of times, or even around a few more blocks. But getting to that trust point then requires reliability, robustness, safety, security. Those are the layers in between which are currently the huge challenge. That's actually what I decided a couple of years ago. It's what I want to focus on. So that is, to me, the biggest hurdle we now need to overcome. Not just for autonomous vehicles, also for autonomous aerial vehicles. We do that for ships, for drones, for trucks, for robotaxis. So it's really the common layer across all the mobility modalities.
Marc?
Yeah. I think I would add to what's been said a couple of things. So in order for the public to trust, they need to see also the value of it. And I see two main values in autonomy, whether it's on the ground or in the air. One is certainly on the ground is safety. And second is also equitable access to mobility. On safety, when we have, in the US, it's in the tune of 40,000 deaths per year. In Europe, it's about 20,000, 1.2 million global level. What we've seen so far with Waymo, as shown so far with data that's been validated by third parties, that the frequency of accidents has gone down by about a factor of 10. Baidu has done presented similar data. So transparency, as has been said before, is key, sharing the data. Another point of reference in San Francisco, where I'm based, a couple of years ago, 60% of the people, of the citizens in the city, were against robotaxis. Today we have, I think, 1,300 vehicles in the city that operate autonomously, and the trust has gone down, at least the positive opinion has gone down to 60%. So it's gone 60% negative to 60% positive. And that's the level of accidents. However, that can be taken down quickly. It's quite an anecdote, but a few weeks ago, a cat was killed by a robotaxi. All of a sudden, hell breaks loose. So one accident, and I'm talking about serious accident, can take the whole thing down. So as we scale, these companies scale, we're more likely there will be an accident, because of, at the same frequency per vehicle, if you double number of vehicle, double number of frequency rate, so that can be reversed pretty quickly.
I think I certainly would say that I would adopt the position that each one of you have taken, whether it's ground or air, and having been in a position to run a state agency and run a federal agency, one of the things we're missing is just everyday education for the general public. What is this thing? We as the industry understand it, but the general public don't. And so if we want to have trust and we want people to not push back against the future of autonomy, let me explain to you what it is, why it will benefit you. We need it not just because it's tech for tech's sake. We need it because we don't have enough people to move us to go where we want to go, and our roads are congested, and we're concerned about our environment, and all of those things mean that we need autonomy. At least that's from my point of view. I want to go back to you, Jan, because based on what you're doing, and even just the answer that you had, you're sort of this nervous system providing safe, reliable software around the movement of the vehicles. But now, as we are tepidly looking at autonomy, we're having some issues, but the more vehicles that are on the roadway, the more chaotic it will get, and we have pedestrians, and we have cyclists, and all this other stuff that's happening. What do you see as the single weakest link in sort of this safety chain? Because you discussed safety. Is it decision-making logic, cybersecurity, maybe even software perception? What's the real issue going on here?
So the more recent trend is not to look at perception and then planning and execution as individual components, but most recent companies build one end-to-end AI model that learns from sensor data direct output. That has the potential to be much more capable in terms of addressing complex driving situations, but it also bears the risk of, everybody's seen that in large language models, most of the time it works exceptionally well, and sometimes there's just nonsense output. You can translate that case directly to autonomous driving. It'll work well, 99.9% of the time, but that's not enough for driving a vehicle on a public street or flying on public airspace. So the challenge is now adding on top that safety layer, that safety observer, you can call it, that makes sure even the main system may, in some exceptional cases, produce something that doesn't make sense. That the layer that catches that and then comes to maybe a degraded but still graceful, safe solution.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Yvonne. I was just saying how chaotic the ground can be. And I think there's a perception that the sky is wide open, and so that it is easier-ish to have autonomous vehicles in the sky versus what we're facing on the ground. Are we correct? Is that just perception, or is that reality?
So
what are we facing?
everything that you have described with the different participants on the ground, including a child playing with a ball, etc., that you don't have in the air. And then as well is the question on ground, we are forced to have an autonomous approach. And autonomous means that the vehicle itself decides every millisecond where to go and what to do. When we are going into the third dimension, we can bridge that with an automated approach. That means we can utilize predefined routes. We can set up a flight plan for every single vehicle. So having a predefined route with waypoints, we know the weather data, we know the NOTAMs and everything. And then we can execute it in a way like an operation of a cable car without the cable you can envision. And by this way, we can do a deconfliction from the beginning so that we don't need to take care, are we bumping into another vehicle? And additionally, having ADS-B, radar sensors, etc., for collision avoidance. The core issue here is to develop a system that now implements drone operations and other air vehicle, man-carrying air vehicle into one system. This is the bottleneck that the industry is facing all over, because all the drones are operated on the UTM, unmanned traffic management system, whereas everything else is happening under air traffic control. And now we need to merge these two systems so that we have an integrated air management platform that has a deconfliction from the beginning in an, at least at the beginning, very automated approach. So I think this is what we should focus on in order, and this is as well accelerating the speed of the implementation when it comes to automated air mobility.
Can I just add one small comment?
Sure.
I think what's just building on these two things together. On the one, the safety layer, and the other one is that connectivity of merging together two different systems. I think one big topic is about actually communication of ground vehicles as well, because compared to the air, they don't talk to each other at the moment, right? And we operate almost like an isolated models running around. And one of the directions where essentially I think it should be developed towards is that when your ground fleet will start talking to each other in terms of both manual operated vehicle and AVs, which will significantly improve the ability for the safety layer to emerge.
I think it's an excellent point. Yvonne, is it possible for there to be widespread, advanced air mobility without a robust traffic management system?
No. The simple answer is no. And you can do remote areas. You can do like zipline transport in Africa, transporting blood and stuff like this. And you can have, of course, a broad implementation of drones. Look at China. In Shenzhen, I think they have 5,000 drone operations per day. But as mentioned, this is all under UTM. And UTM does not fulfill the safety requirements for passenger transportation. And this is actually the bottleneck, whereas we have the problem within ATC, air traffic control, for all the other air vehicles, that one air traffic control officer can only handle 10 planes simultaneously. And therefore, only if we merge these two systems into an air traffic management platform that is highly safe, scalable, and automated, only in this way we really unlock the potential of how the Chinese call it the low altitude economy. And we are talking about the $1 trillion market here, so it's not a minor idea of some crazy people.
Is that something that should be government run, or something that should be private companies come together and say, we'll figure this out on our own?
So I think it is a collaborative approach. And the problems that the air authorities all over the world face is that they are forced from their government to come up with a viable and safe solution. But there is no blueprint. And so they are forced to come up with regulations for the aircrafts, and they are forced to come up with the operational regulations, and they don't know how to do it. And on the other hand, there are a lot of companies developing towards it, there is this hen and egg problem on one hand, and on the second hand, the alignment. So I observed that in Europe a lot, and there were a lot of initiatives, and we participated in, and the governments and everyone is bringing together the different companies, and every company is then lobbying for its own solution. And that's why they are running in circles since 10 years, and I think they will continue to do so. It is a joint collaboration, and this is actually the reason why we founded this international non-profit organization, where we aligned on one vision, and the vision is to have a safe, scalable and automated air traffic management system that serves the citizen, the countries, and is aligned on what the air authorities need.
Thank you. Yuri, you were mentioning before what they're doing in the sky, perhaps we should be doing on the ground, right? You have a massive scaled operation. We do have issues on the ground, and we're going to be in a space shortly where we will have some fleet movement that is autonomous and some that is human-driven. How does that work?
Well, I think from the technology, I would just go back to the safety layer and the safety mechanism which we need to build around. But I'm fully convinced that current model where we have essentially isolated cars driving around hugely relies on a human-to-human communication, because you interact with other drivers, you interact with the pedestrians. Sometimes you find sort of their eyes, you interpret their motion, etc. Right? But you don't operate as a single entity on the road. And what I think we're missing in a big way, and I think that also comes to some sort of standards which maybe the government, maybe the private companies needs to work together, and maybe car manufacturers needs to work as well, is to enable this continuous communications between vehicles which actually operate on the road. And in some ways, I would actually think that if we look in the future, there will be no fully manual sort of operators. There will be some safety mechanism built into the cars, when, effectively, which will take over and do something safer for the whole environment to prevent an accident, etc., etc. So think about sort of a bubble on the road which can suddenly pop up and, force some behavior on this group of vehicles together. That's I think one of the ways where this hybrid model will start evolving.
You're giving this picture of the emergency management system, right?
To some degree, yes.
Marc, you were going to say?
Can I build on that? Yes. I think there's a big difference also if you step back at where we are today, big difference between the two regions where AVs have been deployed, China and the US. In China, the systems rely a lot on 5G and communication, whereas it's not the case at all in the US. One reason for that is the infrastructure in the US is subpar in terms of performance or deployment. But at the same time, we've seen initiatives in the past for V2X, vehicle to everything, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, which has been stepped back by back and forth in terms of regulations, but also the car manufacturers have gone in and there was no standardization between different technologies. So I think there may be a difference between regions, but when we see what Carlo, forgot his name, the Italian professor from MIT earlier, he showed this video with all vehicles moving in all directions at high speed, that will require communication between vehicles. So regulations, but at the same time, that means agreement within the industry to enable to decide whether technology is CV2X or Wi-Fi based. But
okay, but it also, I think, if we go to the direction, it will make the whole sort of environment safer for the normal cars as well, because realistically speaking, right now, even without AVs, we would benefit from having some sort of emergency, protocol for the because we're not always rational in terms of, we as humans not always rational in terms of making the decisions.
I make perfect decisions when I drive.
So what you described will work in environments where you can plan the infrastructure and have the infrastructure under control. Since we're here in Saudi Arabia, I'm thinking of NEOM, I'm thinking of the line where you have the incredible opportunity to build infrastructure from scratch, and then you can account for all of that. In a less structured environment, or just driving vehicles that weren't built for that. I own vehicles that are over 50 years old. I've driven vehicles that are over 100 years old. You will not get, they don't even have electronics. You will not be able to get car-to-car or car-to-whatever communication into those vehicles, and I still want to drive those vehicles in 30, 40 years. But I do also value safety, security, reliability. So I think those infrastructure projects, as we see them here, are actually great, and a great opportunity.
I agree.
In the United States, air traffic and some of these safety and security measures around aviation are the industry coming together and saying, hey, we understand that there's some challenges here, and we're going to come up with a set of rules for the way that we should operate in the skies. And then they go to the federal agencies and say, we talked, and here's what we think we can do to improve, to give safe, reliable comfort to the public. Is that possible in autonomy? Or can we all get together and decide what we think the thing should be and then go to federal agencies in any country?
It depends on the players. And of course, that makes a lot of sense to come together and to collaborate. And I don't think there is any competitor, because we are on the edge of a new way of transportation and mobility, and we can only tackle that together, and we can only find the solutions together. So therefore, actually, this is the way to go, to align first and say, okay, what do we see, what is feasible from a technical point of view? What do we expect that the government and the regulatory bodies need so that they feel comfortable? And of course, then suggest something, and as well prove it in an integrated system like a sandbox. Sandboxing is one of the crucial elements in order to see and get the touch and the feel, because you can discuss forever and you can say this is important, that is important, but seeing is believing.
Anybody else on that?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in on that.
Sure.
I think there's a way for operators to get together and agree. I mean, there are only so many operators. If you look at China, there are 3 AV companies,
Right.
Baidu, Pony, and WeRide. In the US at this point, there's one that operates, the second one ready to go, Zoox. So you can, and then there's going to be a couple more. So you could assume if the government or the public authorities don't want to get involved, you could assume that you could imagine that they get together, agree on the standardized protocol, communications protocol, and communicate the location of their vehicles and the movements of their vehicles, because all that data comes, in a robust way back to their central, to the control center. So imagine that this control center could bring the data together. Nevertheless, I mean, I think if you look at bigger scale, the government should undertake that sort of approach and not enforce, but enforce rather than force, I guess, this level of communication.
Yeah, I think unfortunately in America, government is sort of standing on the edge, waiting to see what happens in the industry, and the industry is to some degree still siloed, company by company, and when we get it right, then we'll be willing to have a conversation with the other guy, but until then, we're going to move ahead and try our technology. Marc, you have what we would probably consider a bird's eye view on the entire mobility landscape. So dollars and cents wise, we are putting vast amounts of money in autonomy. Can you give us an overview of where the industry stands in terms of the deployment of autonomy? So we've talked individually about sky and ground, but where are we globally? And from an investor standpoint, because dollars speak, which do you think is more likely to reach profitability at scale first? Is it the sort of robo-taxi autonomous vehicle on the roadway, or is it the delivery autonomous vehicle in the sky?
I mean, so this effort started to, it went from pilots back in early or mid 2000s, and you were probably involved at that stage. Really started to pick up in the around 2010 with Google, and then really picked up in around 2015, 2016, 17. A number of companies emerged at that time. So billions have been invested. The first commercial application was, I think, 2020 in Phoenix. Since that, we start with the US. It has scaled to 5 cities. Waymo has about 2,500 vehicles operating across so Los Angeles, San Francisco, Phoenix, Atlanta, and Austin. So that is scaling fast. There will be at least 5 more cities by the end of 2026. And I think there's another 10 cities that have been announced beyond those 5 plus 5. Mm-hmm. So this is starting to scale fast. New vehicles will be brought onto the network. There's another player, Zoox, which started to operate, not commercially quite yet, but open to the public in San Francisco. They have done waypoint operations in Las Vegas. So this is where we are in the US. China, 3 operators, as I mentioned earlier, Baidu, Apollo Go, WeRide, and Pony. They together operate across 6 cities. They have about 3,000 vehicles across the 3 of them, each roughly, give or take, 1,000 vehicles. And then Europe is at this point an empty space. However, over the past 18, 24 months, especially the last 12 months, there have been a number of announcements that have been made, especially with the 3 Chinese tech companies that I mentioned earlier. Waymo just came in 1 city, and alongside with Uber, with cities, with national governments. So there's going to be a fast acceleration over the next 24, 36 months in Europe. And then there is the GCC. Abu Dhabi started operating commercially a couple months ago with WeRide and Uber as a partner. And then here in Riyadh, we have a pilot with the same WeRide. And they're also autonomous street sweepers. So there'll be more, and there are other pilots that have been announced in the GCC region. So the next big wave, I guess, is going to be in Europe. Now, on the financial side, so as I said earlier, billions have been invested at this point. All these companies I mentioned are still investing, I would say burning cash or investing, I guess I'd rather say invest. If you look at Waymo by itself, that's probably, there were 250,000 rides a week about 6 months ago. Maybe they're 500,000 at this point. And at that basis, they probably do about $500 million in sales, in revenue, in annual revenue. Probably spending maybe in the tune of $2 billion. So they're still quite far, and they also they're vertically integrated at this point. They're going to sell the tech eventually, so reduce their amount of revenue per ride. So that's going to scale more slowly. I understand also Baidu is close to doing a profitable on a marginal cost. So there's still some time before they're profitable. In the air, we don't have an example quite yet. I guess we'll come back to that. But I don't have any crystal ball on the air mobility in terms of profitability. But at this point, there's no revenue, so it's quite simple to.
Well, listen, every city that Waymo is operating and charging, I've taken a Waymo. And I started in 2021 when they were in Phoenix. And you can see, if you've been in the vehicle enough in different cities over time, you can see how much more robust the drive is now than it was 4 years ago. And of course, continue to improve. We who are in the autonomous vehicle industry have been promising, just around the corner, it's going to be widespread autonomy. And it's really only now that we're starting to see this scaling in the United States, and hopefully the sky scaling will follow soon afterwards.
But Selika, if I may broaden your list a little bit. So we provide software to robotaxi companies, trucking companies, agriculture companies, mining companies, drone companies, and boat companies. So from all of these, I can tell you, agriculture, mining, so those commercial applications, they will be profitable first by a lot. And robotaxi is so capital intense.
Okay.
Same for trucking, that's going to be years down the road.
Are you saying that mining and agriculture, just because of the lack of physical labor for people to do those jobs?
There's lack of physical labor, plus deployment is easier. So you're not driving in a public environment with an incredibly high safety bar, which is there rightfully so. But you're driving in a commercial environment, which you have much better under control, so you can deploy with simpler technology. Still safe, but the safety bar is simply lower. The invest to do that is lower. So profitability is much more near term.
Would you add port operations in with mining and agriculture, or you don't think they're quite there?
So we actually we have worked with Brunswick, largest recreational boat company, so not commercial boat company. You can now order the boat with a system called Simrad Auto Captain. As of I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, you'll get it delivered next spring, so you can get a Boston Whaler with auto docking. For commercial port operations, much larger, much busier. I think it's a little further out. But
Yuri?
for non-commercial next year.
Yeah, but I also think that you're right, and sort of the industrial applications of the autonomy, I think, will be sort of profitable and mainstream much faster. But I also think when we're talking about operating autonomous vehicles, and we are launching next quarter another sort of pilot here with WeRide as well, and AI driver as we just announced. So there will be more and more pilots. But the point is, when we build the model, it's not just about the capex of the vehicle itself. It's also about operations, maintenance, safety officers, and everything around it. And I think sort of still the ecosystem needs to mature a bit more before we start talking about anything sort of mainstream commercially meaningful. I think at the moment we're still in the learning phase and in the pilot/testing phase. And definitely, I think Middle East will be a very interesting place where it can move much faster.
I want to turn our attention in our last few minutes. We are in Riyadh, where, I mean, just from everything we've heard already today, they have ambitious projects underway. It's a blank slate that they're operating on, and building smart cities in a way, perhaps, that you can't design in some of these much, much older cities. So I would ask each one of you, how does it work when you're designing for a purpose-built smart city compared to cities that are centuries old, like a London or a Paris? You know, talk about the opportunities, I guess, in a space like Riyadh to build, and what that means, whether you're in the ground or air. And I'll start with Yvonne, and we can work our way back.
Okay, so when we look at it from a bird's eye perspective, then we see when we implemented the car and there was the red flag act and someone was walking in front of the car to warn others that a car is coming. Right. And then we had horse carriages and cars at the same time, a lot of accidents, a lot of problems and chaos, etc. So with this unique opportunity, we can now design backwards and say, where do we want to end up? How does it look like? Do we have an automated and autonomous approach in 2D mobility, in 3D mobility? How do we have an integrated mobility solution with seamless integration of existing logistic chains, and on the other hand, a seamless experience for passengers? And we can envision that, and we can backwards engineer. I think the most important thing here is to know where we end up, or where we want to end up, and then work backwards on a very de-risking strategy, like you said, mining first and this first. So applications where we can de-risk and where we can have an easy implementation, and step by step then increase the level of complexity. And in this way, we can, you know, pave the way for the future of integrated mobility.
Yuri.
I want a couple of thoughts here, and speaking about Riyadh in particular as an example, I think typically in the cities with much more modern infrastructure, you also have much more modern regulatory authorities and the government authorities. And if you look at the Transport General Authority here, the way they are trying to push the boundaries on autonomy enablement in the country, that's actually amazing. It's much, much better than sort of we've seen in many other places around the world. So I think first thing is that modern infrastructure sometimes, and many times, means modern regulators and modern regulatory frameworks and ability to do it faster. And the second thing, a bit sort of maybe technology-wise, I think that in environments like here, for example, it's much easier to incorporate new technology elements, hardware technology elements into the road networks, into the signal networks, into the connectivity, because, be honest, you don't have a complexity of London infrastructure here, where you cannot touch a stone without sort of ruining some 300-year-old history, right? You can go and embed more technological infrastructure into the roads, into the environment. That's very much faster. So I think that things together is a big enabler.
Yeah.
I think it's very simple. It's an incredible opportunity to build a city with digital and physical infrastructure to enable deployment of autonomous technology much sooner. Not because the safety bar is lower, but the ability for technology to fulfill that safety bar is just, the gap is smaller. Great opportunity.
Yeah. Marc?
I guess just at one angle, which is really at the heart of infrastructure, if you look at older cities, and again, Carlo earlier mentioned, I forgot what city it was, but the amount of Singapore, yeah. I mean, we can reduce the number of parking spots by 70% with robotaxis. Why build them in the first place if you build new cities? So parking structures in Paris, for instance, parking structures in the cities are being transformed into urban logistics hub because they're not being used anymore. So if you start from a blank sheet of paper, parking spots or structures, pick-up and drop-off points, street parking, all this, and on top of telecom, that can be also designed such a way where it's integrated in the streets or in infrastructure. Charging as well for EVs can be integrated in the vehicle, again, with this dynamic charging in the streets. You can imagine static charging as well, obviously, but all these things, the infrastructure especially, are things that can be done very differently.
I think, at least from my vantage points, one of the things that is most exciting about what's happening here is the messaging to the community at large. 2030 is coming in Riyadh, and everybody feels as if they have a piece of it. All these communities are striving towards it. There are signs everywhere. There is constant communication. And part of the thing about getting both government and citizenry to row in the same direction is to message, is community engagement, is to drive home the point, pardon the pun, on a regular basis, that we are all doing a thing together. And aside from the fact that this is a new space and it's technology that's coming into new infrastructure, the messaging here is a lesson, frankly, for the rest of the world. I want to thank you all for being with us this afternoon and wish you a good rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.